They told us Mars was dead, a barren red desert with nothing but dust storms and ancient dried riverbeds. They were wrong. I know because I heard it myself. That sound coming from beneath the surface, rhythmic and deliberate, like a heartbeat from something that shouldn't exist. And I know because I went down there, deep into structures that twisted like monuments beneath the Martian soil, into chambers that have been sealed since before humanity took its first breath. What I found changed everything, and what happened next? Well, that's why I'm telling you this now, while I still can, before they make sure no one ever hears the truth. My name doesn't matter anymore. I made sure of that. But what I'm about to share does matter, more than anything I've ever been part of. People assume Mars is just a red desert, a place where nothing ever lived and nothing ever could. But I know the truth. It's not what they want you to think. You've probably heard about those strange blips and radio pulses scientists keep picking up lately, signals that get explained away as cosmic noise. Well, those signals are real. They're intelligent, and they're coming from places no one expects. I don't have much time, so let me say this as clear as I can. Mars is not empty, and we weren't the first ones there. I was a lead scientist at NASA, specializing in astrobiology when the call came through. They didn't give me much information, just that they needed my experience for a high-level classified mission. No questions allowed. You don't get to say no to a call like that. When I was brought in for a briefing at headquarters, it didn't meet my eyes. That was the first sign something wasn't right. The director pulled me into a secure room, and once I saw the grainy images spread across the table, my pulse stopped. Right there in the photos was a structure, a massive, towering shape that didn't belong on any natural planet, much less Mars. A pyramid, not a crumbling, weather-worn formation, but something that looked built, engineered with precision. Lines, corners too clean to be nature's work. It was buried in the Martian sand, just barely visible, but it was there. They found it years back, but no one outside a few top-tier government scientists knew a thing. The public wasn't ready, they'd said. And besides, NASA had quietly lost contact with the rover that stumbled onto it, like something intervened. NASA, with all its pride in exploration and science, had been quietly sitting on this discovery. And now they want a team to go in to see if there was more to this pyramid than what the rover had picked up. And let's be honest, they were looking for leverage for technology, maybe even a biological weapon. They brought in the military, 2 armed guards, men who didn't talk or look anyone in the eye. We weren't going just to explore Mars. We were going to Mars because someone thought they could bring something back. The team was small, selected with a kind of paranoia I hadn't seen before. There was Dr. Marcus Wells, an intense, quiet geologist with a background in ancient Earth civilizations. Dr. Nadia Lee, a biotechnology specialist who had that unsettling habit of smiling at all the wrong times. And then there were the soldiers, special forces assigned to keep us safe. They said, though no one could explain from what. The mission brief was barely a page long, full of classified codes and terminology that didn't tell us much more than our destination coordinates. That was it. No big welcome, no press release. Just a list of strict orders, security checks, and the knowledge that if we didn't come back, no one would know we'd even gone. As we trained, I started feeling the weight of what we were doing. None of this was normal. We weren't allowed to talk to anyone outside the team about the mission, not even family. The isolation was intense. It was as if we were ghosts, part of a story no one would ever read. Everything about this was planned. To the second, from our oxygen supplies down to the nutrient packs we'd be eating. Yet there was this underlying sense of dread. Dr. Wells, who'd been on dozens of missions, couldn't look at the pyramid photos for long. Lee kept joking it was just a rock, but I knew she didn't believe that. We took off in a private capsule, one designed for stealth and speed, not for comfort. The rocket was a tight metal shell around us, and as Mars grew closer, I found myself staring at the instruments, feeling the weight of what we were heading into. I kept going over the images, the eerie outline of the pyramid sticking out of the sand, and the strange data our computers couldn't explain. There was no record of this shape on Mars, no geological reason for it to exist. And yet there was waiting. When we touched down, it was dusk on Mars, if you could even call it that. The light was thin, barely enough to cast shadows across the ground. But there it was, a massive structure looming out of the sand, almost mocking us. Wells muttered under his breath something about it feeling wrong, but the soldiers just looked ahead, unmoved. We knew we had limited time and had to move fast. The pyramid was even bigger than it had looked in the photos, smooth, metallic, yet covered with a layer of fine reddish dust, almost like something had tried to hide it, but not well enough. We approached carefully, instruments out, every meter documented. I kept my eyes on the walls, watching for any sign of markings or symbols. There was a strange rhythm to the way we were moving, almost like we were being watched. And then a pulse, a faint, steady vibration that rippled through the ground beneath us, barely perceptible but impossible to ignore. Lee was the first to hear it, tilting her head, frowning. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, her voice cracking a bit. We all heard it, that low, humming sound, so faint it seemed more like a trick of the mind. But the closer we got to the pyramid, the stronger it became. The entrance was partially buried in sand, just as we'd seen in the photos. We spent hours trying to clear it, digging out the hard, compact Martian soil, hoping we could pry open whatever passageway lay beyond. Finally, with one last pull, the door shifted, revealing a dark passage descending into the depths of the pyramid. The air felt different inside, dense, charged, as though the walls themselves were vibrating, alive. Our flashlights scanned the entrance, revealing smooth surfaces, unnatural lines, and corners too precise to be natural formations. Wells murmured something to himself, staring intently at the walls. This doesn't belong here," he said, his voice barely a whisper. He was right. Everything about this place felt out of place, a haunting echo of something ancient that should have stayed buried. We hadn't been inside for more than a few minutes before the instruments started picking up strange readings, atmospheric fluctuations, faint energy pulses. None of it made sense. And then, out of nowhere, Lee's handheld device started beeping wildly. Numbers flashed across the screen in patterns that defied logic. She looked up, eyes wide, a look of pure disbelief on her face. This isn't possible," she stammered. But we all knew better. This was Mars, a place where nothing was supposed to be alive, where nothing was supposed to be waiting for us. As we pressed further into the pyramid, the pulses grew stronger, resonating through our bodies like an unspoken warning. The corridor stretched ahead, walls so smooth they seemed almost polished, reflecting our lights in ways that didn't quite make sense. Every sound was muted, dampened. Every movement felt heavier than it should. We approached slowly, the soldiers leading the way, their movements cautious and steady. It took us nearly an hour to navigate the initial passages. The pyramid was massive, far larger than the external dimension suggested. Dr. Wells ran his gloved fingers across the surface, his face a mixture of fascination and dread. "This isn't possible," he muttered. "This doesn't belong here." Inside, the temperature dropped immediately, a chill that seeped through our suits. The walls glowed faintly in the dark, like some internal light source was pulsing within them. Lee tapped her handheld scanner, eyebrows knitting. "I don't understand," she said. "The material, it's like nothing we've encountered." As we moved, strange patterns began to emerge along the walls. Symbols etched into the surface, arranged in lines and spirals. They looked alien, unintelligible, yet there was something unsettlingly familiar about them. The corridor twisted and turned, drawing us deeper. After a while, the soldiers stopped, motioning for us to hold. One of them pointed to a section of the floor, slightly raised, almost imperceptible, a pressure plate. We exchanged nervous glances, realizing this place was rigged with traps. Intentional, intelligent traps. Whoever built this pyramid had designed it to be unwelcoming. We stepped around the plate carefully, and the atmosphere seemed to shift, becoming denser, more charged. We found ourselves in a large chamber. The walls stretched up high above us, disappearing into shadows, and the symbols on them glowed with a faint blue light. At the center of the room was an altar-like structure, covered in dust but intact. On the floor around, it were fragments of bone, small, delicate, like they belonged to a creature we couldn't identify. Lee knelt down, brushing dust off one fragment. She was silent for a long moment before standing, her face pale. Organic matter, she whispered. This isn't from Mars. This is something else. We all felt it then, a chill creeping down our spines. We weren't just looking at a structure. We were standing inside a grave. My device began picking up faint signals again, a rhythmic pulse that seemed to emanate from the walls. Wells adjusted his headset, voice shaky. I'm getting something, some kind of frequency, but it's too faint to make out. He turned to me, eyes wide. It's not natural. The deeper we went, the stranger the signals became. The patterns weren't random. They were organized, precise, like a language encoded in sound. But we couldn't decode it. It felt like a warning. After what felt like hours, we found another room with rows of strange markings running across the walls. In the middle was a pedestal. On it sat an object, small, black, unnaturally smooth. It looked almost like obsidian, but there was a warmth to it, a faint glow pulsing in sync with the signals. Lee approached, hand outstretched, but one of the soldiers grabbed her arm. Don't, he said, voice low and tense. We don't know what this is. She stepped back reluctantly, frustration and fear in her eyes. Suddenly, a low rumbling echoed through the chamber. The ground trembled. The walls began to pulse, light from the symbols growing brighter, flickering as if the pyramid was coming to life. Wells stared at the walls, face drained of color. We need to get out of here, he whispered. Then, without warning, the entrance sealed shut with a heavy, echoing thud, trapping us inside. The sound was a deep, hollow boom that echoed endlessly. We froze, staring back at the passage, now just a smooth wall. No seams, no cracks. Panic rippled through us. One of the soldiers pounded on the wall, the sound swallowed by oppressive silence. This can't be right, Wells whispered, eyes wide. It shouldn't be able to do that. Lee pulled out her scanner, but readings were chaotic, signals bouncing, shifting wildly. It's like the walls are moving, she stammered. I can't get a clear reading. One soldier reached for his radio, but there was only static. Our communication with the surface was cut off. We were alone. The floor shifted, a faint vibration that grew stronger. The corridor ahead began to twist, walls bending and folding into new shapes. Passageways branched, off where before there had been only a straight path. The entire layout was changing, molding itself around us. What is this? Wells muttered. This place isn't just a structure. It's adapting to us. We had no choice but to move forward. The corridors shifted and twisted in endless patterns, each corner revealing another winding path. And that was when I started to hear the whispers. At first, I thought it was the others, a low murmur, words barely audible. But as we moved, it grew louder, clearer. Leave. Trespassers. Unworthy. The words slithered into my head, sharp and cold. I glanced around, but the others seemed oblivious. No one else could hear it. This is not your place. I didn't say anything, but deep down, I knew it wasn't a trick. We had trespassed somewhere we were never meant to be. As we moved deeper, the traps began appearing. The first was barely noticeable, a thin line across the floor. One soldier didn't see it. He stepped across, and instantly a panel opened, releasing thick vapor that swallowed him. We heard him coughing, gasping, but when the vapor cleared, he was gone. Just gone. No sign of him, his radio, his suit. It was as if he'd never been there. The shock hit us hard. This wasn't just a trap. It was a message. We pressed on. The traps became more frequent, more complex. Each time, we barely made it through, losing another member to the maze. Then we found inscriptions carved deep into stone, strange symbols, jagged and angular, arranged in rows that seemed to tell a story. Lee tried scanning them, but results were scrambled. It's like they're alive, she said, frustrated. Every time I get close to a translation, it shifts. Wells studied the walls, face pale. These markings, they're warnings. They're telling us to leave. But there was no way out. Every path led deeper. The whispers grew louder, filling my head. The ancient. Protectors. You do not belong. The lights on our suits flickered. Temperature dropped sharply. The walls began, emitting a low, steady hum, vibrating in sync with our scanners. Lee's hand shook. The readings, they're off the charts. This place isn't just a structure. It's some kind of machine. The corridor ahead split open, revealing another chamber. The air inside was thick, heavy, pressing down with intensity that made it hard to breathe. In the center stood another pedestal with a small, shimmering object glowing with faint, pulsing light. Lee reached for it, hand trembling, but I grabbed her arm. "Don't touch it," I said. "We don't know what it is." She looked at me, eyes wide with fear and curiosity. What if it's a key? What if it's the only way out? But before we could decide, the walls began closing in, stones grinding together with a deafening roar. The passageway was gone, replaced by solid stone. The air grew thicker, hotter, pressure building. Wells looked around, face twisted in terror. "We're not getting out of here, are we?" I didn't have an answer. The pyramid was closing in, walls pressing closer. And that strange object lay there, almost calling to us. We were trapped. Walls pressing in, air growing thick and hot. I couldn't tear my eyes from the pulsing object. It was as if it were breathing, glowing with a heartbeat that wasn't ours. And then it happened, a voice. Not out loud, but in our heads, sharp and clear. "Leave this place. You are trespassers. This world is not yours." The voice was powerful, layered, as if countless speakers talked at once. It resonated deep inside my head, overwhelming, ancient, immense beyond anything human. Primitive, unworthy, leave or suffer. We staggered back, but the voice continued, relentless. I looked at the others. They'd heard it too. Lee's eyes were wide, hands trembling. Wells stared down the corridor, face pale. The soldiers gripped their weapons, but looked shaken. The walls shifted, opening to reveal a passageway. A faint light glowed within. We had no choice but to move forward. As we moved deeper, we came to a vast chamber lined with strange capsules, each glowing faintly. Inside were figures, tall, angular beings, their skin iridescent gray. They were motionless, frozen in time, eyes closed, faces carved with solemnity and purpose. Guardians, warriors, preserved, waiting. One soldier edged forward, flashlight on the nearest capsule. Then we saw it, condensation forming on the glass, liquid running down the surface. The temperature had dropped, and a faint hum filled the air. These beings were starting to wake up. The voice returned, louder, reverberating through our skulls. "Your time here is over. You were warned. You will leave or be removed." Lee frantically scanned the room. These readings, the energy output, it's off the charts. Whatever's happening, it's going to escalate fast. One by one, the capsules began pulsing with light. The beings inside stirred, eyes fluttering open, revealing dark, empty gazes that pierced right through us. "Run," I whispered. We turned and fled, sounds of metal scraping and hissing filling the air as capsules opened, releasing strange, thick mist that rolled toward us. The voice didn't stop. "Your species is young. Foolish. You were warned." The corridors twisted again, walls morphing, blocking paths. Behind us, the Guardians followed, movements almost mechanical, yet terrifyingly swift. We stumbled into another chamber filled with inscriptions. Wells staggered to a stop, eyes darting over symbols that twisted and shifted, refusing to be understood. "Their warnings," he murmured, voice breaking. This place was never meant to be found. The mist closed in, thick and suffocating, carrying a sharp metallic scent. I could hear soldiers shouting, their footsteps echoing. Lee grabbed my arm, face etched with terror. "There has to be a way out. We can't just disappear here." But I knew there was no guarantee of escape. The Guardians were relentless, their footsteps echoing, a steady rhythm matching the pounding in my head. The voice returned, colder. "Your time is over. You will be erased." The walls shifted again, opening a narrow passage. We raced forward, desperate, without any sense of direction, only faint hope it might lead to an exit. Finally, we reached an opening, a large chamber that looked like it might lead outside. I could see a faint glow ahead, sunlight, weak and distant, but enough to give me hope. We pushed forward, but as we reached the threshold, the voice echoed one last time. You cannot leave. You will remember nothing. I stumbled, vision blurring, rooms spinning as the voice reached inside my mind, tearing at my memories, my thoughts. I could feel pieces of myself slipping away, fragments fading, replaced by dull emptiness. Lee collapsed beside me, eyes wide, filled with fear and confusion. What were we? She whispered, barely audible, lost, as though she couldn't remember why we were here. As the world faded, I clung to one final thought, a spark of defiance. Whatever happened here, I knew it was bigger than anything humanity had ever encountered. And even if I couldn't remember the details, even if they took it all away, I would hold on to the certainty that Mars was not ours, that something far more ancient and powerful had staked its claim long before we set foot here. We stumbled out of the pyramid's last chamber, barely able to stand, dragging each other forward under the heavy Martian sky. My mind was clouded, fragments of memory slipping away. But one thought was clear: we had to get off this planet. Now, Lee clung to my arm, face pale, eyes wide. She kept muttering under her breath, fragments that made no sense. But we couldn't stop. The faint glow on the horizon, our capsule, was our only hope. We staggered toward it, every step a battle. The soldiers were gone, lost in that maze. Wells hadn't made it either. But there was no time to mourn. The pyramid had let us go for a reason. The warning played on repeat. You will remember nothing. But I did remember, just enough to know that leaving was the only option. We made it to the capsule, throwing ourselves into the small, cold space. My hands shook as I started the launch sequence. I glanced at Lee. She was slumped in her seat, eyes fixed ahead, still muttering. I focused on the controls. Everything inside me screamed to leave. As we lifted off, the pyramid grew smaller, fading into the vast red landscape, a strange monument that mocked us even from this distance. For the first time, I felt relief. Then, as we broke through the upper atmosphere, static crackled over the comms. At first faint, then louder, sharp and grating. A voice, not human. Cold, metallic, yet filled with measured authority. Return is not permitted. The words sank into me like ice. I stared at the console. I hadn't activated any external communications. Your species was warned. Mars is not for you. I looked at Lee, but she was still in that trance-like state, eyes empty. I reached out, shook her shoulder, but she barely reacted. The air grew colder, an unnatural chill seeping into my bones. Then the trajectory changed. The coordinates shifted, adjusting without any input from me. I scrambled at the controls, trying to override, but it was no use. The systems were locked, and I realized with sickening certainty that we weren't going home. The capsule veered off course, away from Earth, into a trajectory that sent us drifting into the dark expanse of space. The voice came again, colder, with finality that left no room for hope. Your knowledge cannot return. You will remember nothing. I sat back, hands falling from the controls, the weight of truth settling over me. We weren't meant to leave. The Guardians had allowed us to live, but only on their terms. Mars wasn't just a planet. It was territory guarded by something far older, far stronger than anything humanity could comprehend. The capsule drifted further, Mars shrinking behind us, swallowed by darkness. I felt strange calm settle over me, numbness. That dulled the fear. But deep inside, a single memory lingered, a spark of defiance that refused to fade. I could still see the Guardians, their cold, unblinking eyes, watching, knowing we would never tell anyone what we'd found. Mars wasn't ours. It never had been, and it never would be. It belonged to them, the ones who built that pyramid, who left those warnings, who watched from shadows. And they'd made sure the truth would stay buried, hidden from the world. As stars stretched before us, an endless sea of darkness, a final question rose. If Mars is claimed, if that ancient presence guards it so fiercely, then what else is out there, hidden in places we've barely begun to explore? And more importantly, Will we be wise enough to leave it alone or foolish enough to disturb it again?